You are listening to Insight, the University of St Andrews Student Physics Society's podcast. I'm your host and social convener, Samuel Lavery. Join us as we journey into the lives of St Andrews academics, discovering their passions, inspirations, and motivations. Today we're interviewing Dr Bruce Sinclair, the Director of Teaching here at the School of Physics. Thanks for joining us. So I thought we would start off with some questions about physics and your life related to that, and then we would move on to some more abstract things potentially. So could you maybe tell us a bit about your positions here at St Andrews, the university?
Okay, so I came to St Andrews as a student a very long time ago, back in 1979. So I had the distinction of being a first year class rep back in all those years ago. Did my first degree here, got enthused by physics, got enthused by some of the teaching staff at the time, then did a PhD here with Malcolm Dunn. From there went on to a postdoc with Malcolm and Wilson, temporary lectureship, senior lectureship reader, and for the last while, amongst other things, been director of teaching of the school. So I've been here for a while.
Fantastic. We've been so happy to have you for so long, I'm sure. So could you tell us a bit about your research for the years, maybe?
Okay, so I started off with Malcolm Dunn all those years ago in light matter interaction, looking at how laser beams going through clouds of atoms, we could do interesting things, and told us interesting things about the interaction between light and atoms and how we could generate different wavelengths, and fascinating stuff, putting all that physics together. Following that was single frequency, high resolution spectroscopy with lasers, etc. on that. So a bit of a change of field thereafter, did a postdoc first of all with Wilson Sibbett, working on short pulse lasers, so doing some quite fun things there in very short pulse generation and various mode-locked lasers at the time. And then moved on to my second postdoc with, as it happens, Wilson Sibbett and Malcolm Dunn again, working on diapump solid-state lasers, where new high-power diode laser had recently become available. It was the way that laser physics was going, and I was delighted to move fields into there to work with these two. And after a while doing that, I was able to apply for a temporary lectureship in the same general area in terms of where my research was going, and then spent quite a number of years working on miniature solid-state lasers and microchip lasers in particular, was where I think we had some useful successes, and learning about the way these things worked, how in fact they work much better than we'd any reason to believe they should work, which is rather nice. And having sorted that out, trying to see how we could use these in a number of applications, having done some sort of underlying physics type things, then working on various projects involving industry to see how we could then use these new devices for doing interesting things. For example, monitoring how the North Sea oil pipelines are or are not lying safely on the seabed, looking at airflow around aircraft and the likes. So a number of places where remote sensing with these compact, efficient, reliable lasers might be useful.
A fantastic range of applications then. So was lasers and light something that you loved as a student then, in particular?
Yeah. But one of many things. There was lots of looking back on my first degree, I can look back at all sorts of things that were fun, and some bits I wasn't so excited by. But yes, working with lasers, light, and some of the people here at the time who were working in that area, which frankly was just as important to me, really got me into that area. And looking back, I was really stimulated by some of the staff who were teaching me back as an undergraduate student, and I'm forever grateful to some people who took the time to interact with me in various ways, and have got me to where I am now, essentially.
It's what St Andrews is famed for, its teaching, obviously. What was maybe one of the concepts that you struggled with, however, where your teachings didn't quite surmount that hill?
Okay, well, a story that quite a number of students already know about, because it's an example I use, is second year linear algebra. And I was doing okay with it, but there was one particular week where I had been working for a long time on some tutorial problems, and I was getting absolutely nowhere. That's the way I felt. And our tutor in mathematics at the time was a person who I was a bit nervous of as a second year student, for no particularly good reason, but as a second year student, right? And just something in this linear algebra just wasn't going right. And I got on a bicycle from my hall residence, cycled into the basement of the maths building, knocked on this door of this person who I was very nervous about, and after 10 minutes talking with me, she'd found exactly where the miscomprehension was, got me in the right direction. So this person, who I had thought of before as being a tad dragon-like, was an absolute fan. And so, she was really professional about it in terms of finding out where the issue was and helped me to see where I needed to go. And so it took me from a bit of mathematics, which was I had reached a stopping point, and she'd helped me find the way to get around that stopping point. And I frequently use that story, with students who are talking to me about their difficulties in certain places as an example of where I've hit a brick wall, made contact with a member of staff, and they've helped me find a door through it.
Fantastic, what a satisfying resolution. So, during your time here, could you maybe describe some of the things that have changed in either physics at large, or St Andrews, or the university? I mean, I'm saying you could probably choose one of those and talk about that for a bit.
What has changed? Well, I can say that some things stay the same. I know it's not the question you asked, but some things stay the same, and I think one of the nice things that stay the same is we've got a great bunch of students here, and we have a community that's here, and I think that's really important that stay the same. And the other thing that I think is really important is that we still have students who, it is okay to be different. And it was something that was very much the case in my days as a student, and I understand it's still okay today to be who you want to be rather than who the crowd wants you to be, and I think that's really important. In terms of things that have changed, the biggest changes are in terms of the number of people who are here. Way more people here now than when I was a student. And there's also, very positively, much larger, much stronger research programme in the school than way back then as well. And it's really nice to see the school develop in various ways and now be recognised in its research and its teaching even more highly than it was in my day as a student.
We've really blossomed then.
I can point to lots of good things. Clearly there's ups and downs over the years, depending on how research funding does or doesn't flow into the building in terms of what's happening around us, and the world can be a strange place sometimes, but I think there's a lot that we can be thankful for, yes.
Lovely. So you just touched upon research and how we've grown in that area. Could you maybe tell us a notable research story? What goes on behind the doors that are closed in the labs downstairs?
Lots of hard work. Lots of serious thinking. Lots of setting up of experimental kit and trying to make things work. Problem solving. And when things do work and there's new results, some serious celebrations. Research is not smooth. If we knew what the results were going to be, it wouldn't be research. And so there's lots of exploring, there's lots of problem solving, puzzling, communication, and a satisfaction when things work out. So whether it's my area of laser physics that I was very much involved in, and the excitement of when things actually start working, you can see that working in the bench, the interesting things one does when one works with external collaborators and getting those ideas passed across to be used elsewhere. The interesting things that can happen on international collaborations and dealing with different cultures with the research, down to the crazy things that happens when you get film crews coming in and you've got to produce all sorts of effects for cameras to see things happening in the lab. And one of my memories strongly is of a laser beam where for the cameras, DV cameras, to see the laser beam where to blow some form of vapor through the laser. So I was there with a vat of liquid nitrogen and blowing across this to get a cloud of water vapor to go through the laser beam. And I suddenly thought, well, if this camera's watching me blowing into a vat of liquid nitrogen rather than watching a laser beam, it would make probably a funnier story than the one that they were actually trying to film. Fortunately, I think they were looking at the laser beam itself. But yeah, it's there's lots of hard work and lots of fun, lots of satisfaction.
Excellent. So it sounds as if you've had, a full life of working in physics, but if you weren't working in physics, what would you be up to?
If I wasn't working in physics, what would I be up to? Well, I'm a qualified swimming teacher, so I guess that's a possibility. I think that'd be a hard way of earning a living. I suspect if I wasn't in physics, I'd be in some other career where I was interacting with people in some form of educational, organisational thing, in terms of where I could see myself fitting in now. My laser physics research is something which is now not really there. The role I've had for the last number of years associated with Director of Teaching has been much more towards the organisational, towards the scholarship and education, towards trying to work as part of a team here to get a good experience for our students educationally. And so that's where I've been now. And so I'm still very much physics, of course I am, but it's now physics with primarily the thoughts and education end of things, as opposed to primarily on the discipline-based research end of things. So there's been a move there, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm very happy with that.
Well, I would say you do fantastic at education. So what's it like being a lecturer? What are some of the challenges or satisfying or annoying things?
Satisfying is seeing students succeed. I can get good satisfaction seeing some of our most able students succeed, but frankly I get even more satisfaction when I see go across the stage students who I know have had to overcome significant difficulties in their time here, and it is a very satisfying part of the job to see students develop, particularly when there's been things I've been aware of, and I as part of my role there's all sorts of things I have to become aware of, and it's particularly satisfying to see some of those students succeed and move on and go on to interesting things. So that has to be the good, really one of the really good things is there. Annoying things, I'm reasonably tolerant, but it is certainly makes for a much more pleasant learning environment where everybody involved wants to learn.
Of course, yeah. So, one of the things that we asked the students here is what we would like to see you tell us about. Because there's all these wonderful and magical physics concepts, but some of them are a bit difficult to explain, especially if you're stuck in a 55-minute lecture and you're kind of like, where is this going? So, could you give us a breakdown of special relativity in 1 minute, as requested by the students? Time starts now.
So in special relativity, we have this idea that light will travel the same speed independent of what we are doing relative to where the light is. And that has the rather curious effect that if I'm measuring a light beam of a laser going along the passenger cabin of a jumbo jet, I'm measuring it in the cabin or measuring it on the ground, I should measure the same speed if I do it properly.
Half a minute.
Half a minute. We end up doing that because other strange things happen as well in terms of things like length, which we think of as being constant. We need to be rather more careful about it. And with 15 seconds to go, there's absolutely no chance of me drawing a zigzag line and a straight line and some clocks and a spacecraft to show you what's going on, but it all works out beautifully in the end.
Fantastic.
What a cop-out.
Thank you. What are some of the key features that you think make a good lecture?
A good lecture, I think we need to have a good, well-defined goal. I think we need to have an instructor who has thought through the learning process. I think we need to have students who are coming in with the same background knowledge and understanding that the instructor is expecting them to have. And I think we need to have an environment where everybody's willing to think and do things together. It needs to be a linking into things that have been done before and following on through a logical argument to explain what's going on. In some areas at least, I think getting students to think through some of the ideas can be very helpful. In some topics, and actually seeing demonstrations of what's going on, I think can be very useful for a variety of reasons. And some form of helping make links to previous material and within the material that's there, I think is really important as well. And need to say some practice in what's going on. There's lots of places where hiccups can occur, and that is why I think where there can be mechanisms for lecturers to check in with students as to where they're at can be really helpful in terms of allowing the teaching session to continue with as many students on board as possible. Hence, use of clickers has been quite widespread now in the school.
Excellent. So one of the things that you've incorporated into some of the lectures that I've had with you is musical instruments. So I believe your son plays a musical instrument, and I believe you brought in a bassoon maybe to one of my first year lectures. Could you elaborate on the inclusion of music in your teaching?
So I did the first year Waves and Optics course, which has a chunk in the middle on oscillations and waves, travelling waves, standing waves. Both are really important in a wide range of physics and engineering. Standing waves aren't stuck just in music, but I think they're a very nice example in music. And I think many people in the class can relate to ideas of musical instruments. And so I've not brought in a bassoon to my knowledge, but double bass, chanter from the bagpipes, synthesizers, and various other things, certainly yes. And so just earlier this week, in fact, I had the first year class in there, and one of my colleagues brought in a double bass for me. We had a bass player as one of the students who was able to take part in this, and we were able to use that instrument as a demonstration of some of the physics we've gone through in terms of the way that waves travel, the way that resonance is set up in strings, and how we can use those ideas in the context of music to explain some useful physics.
Another thing that you bring to your lectures is an interest in photography. You've included a lot of pictures that I believe you yourself have taken, and we've seen you in the labs going around taking promotional pictures as well. Could you maybe describe your interest in photography, and if you have a picture that's particularly special to you, and what kind of made that picture so special?
So I would not regard myself as a particularly skillful photographer. It's something which I do as part of my job, and it's something I do as part of my leisure. I try to make a half-decent job of it, of course, and it's more than just snapping here and there. Clearly some things are just snapping here and there. In terms of photography at work, my photographs end up in the prospectus and the recruitment brochure and so on, and I'm looking for photographs that tell a story. I'm probably always looking for photographs to tell a story, but certainly for work I'm looking for photographs which illustrate what we do and try to give a reasonably accurate and hopefully positive picture of what we do on the way through. I'm looking at pictures which are going to make sense as pictures to the people who are looking at them, so they need to show what's going on. I'm aware that there are some people out there who think about physics as being an entirely solitary activity, and therefore I'm very keen that in most pictures I take and we use for publication there's more than one person in. I'm keen to have some smiling faces in there, frankly, as well on occasion. So I'm looking for things that are around the school and photographs that I can take, and students who are willing to be involved in that. Wider, then, yeah, anything is interesting. And you've asked about pictures that I might be more happy with or want to point out, and there's various things I could choose. I've chosen a picture which I don't think is particularly photographically special. I think it's a nice picture and it brings back good memories for me. My wife and I had hiked up a rocky mountain stroke hill in the Lofoten Islands in northern Norway, and it had been a really good scramble up to the top of this thing in the most brilliant sunshine and looking out over the fjord and these amazing tooth-like spikes of the mountains along the island chain. It's the countryside, the scenery, which I think is really special. I tie that in with memories of our walk, hike, scramble up to this place, and then looking down over the fjord, which then later in that day, because it was long summer sunshine, so actually about 6:30 at night, we set off on a kayaking expedition along this fjord to the far end of the fjord, and we walked the far end, and we got back, I don't know, it was sort of midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, we got back, and it was still light when we could do this. And so this photograph brings back lots of happy memories, as well as I think being an interesting photograph in its own right.
Wow, that sounds a really magical adventure. Is there something that you're particularly proud that you've done in your life? Maybe a particular hike or challenge, or something maybe a bit outlandish?
I can maybe try and join a couple of those together. So I'm going to comment briefly on 2 hikes that were never intended to be so. A number of years ago, having been to a research conference in California, a small group of us went to Yosemite, and we decided to take a hike up the side of the valley, and we just kept walking. And we ended up at the back of Half Dome, and then we ended up walking up the back of this thing and looking out over the valley, which was absolutely incredible. We had enough water with us, but frankly we didn't have as much in the way of resources as we should have had with us, but we made it back down to the car, rather hungry by the end of the day, and drove into a diner somewhere outside the park, and this person came to serve us at the table and said, "Gee guys, I bet you got a story to tell." And we wondered just how bad we looked, but it had been an absolutely fantastic day, albeit an unexpected one. And I joined that with a slightly different story of when I was with my family in northwest Finland at the corner of 3 countries, and we'd done a shorter walk earlier in the day. I was with my older son, who was, I guess, an early teenager at the time, and we again started off going for a short walk on a nature trail, and he and I just kept going to the top of Sana, I think it was called, which is, a respectable hike. We saw the midnight sun, or the midnight light at least, at the top of this thing, and then walked back down and just collapsed into the cabin at whatever it was, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, having had a really satisfying day's walking.
Fantastic. Dr. Sinclair, unstoppable.
If only.
So, another very popular question amongst the students here at the university was, which superpower would you have?
Which superpower would I have?
Bearing in mind, physicists are going to scrutinise this.
I'm allowed to choose making people content?
What a lovely superpower to choose. Yes, I would allow that, definitely.
Good, thank you.
And another question which is quite popular is 3 things that you would take to a desert island, popular with every interviewer.
3 things, right. Well, I think the first has to be The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, or at least the modern equivalent in terms of a smartphone and satellite connection. Is that permitted?
Oh, I don't know, I mean...
Or is that 2 things?
Well, I think a smartphone connection's going to be patchy at best.
That's why I want the satellite connection, you see.
I've been told I was too lenient last time,
Okay.
so afraid not.
No dear, right. And I was thinking about this. I can't really take my wife as a thing, can I? That would be a bit rude calling her a thing.
Yeah, I think so. You can invite her along, but...
Yeah, okay. And how long am I on this desert island?
Who can say? You might get rescued any day now, or you could be here indefinitely.
Okay, so I think one thing I'd like to take with me is an escape mechanism then.
Ooh, that seems a bit of a scam. I'm not quite sure that'd be allowed either.
Oh, you're not being very generous to me here. How about some food and water then? Am I allowed that?
Oh, definitely.
Oh, good, thank you.
Yeah.
Right, so I can
It's
survive
a well-provisioned island.
It's a well-provisioned island, okay.
You can have coconuts and, bananas growing on these wild trees. But what would you bring with you?
What would I bring with me?
Maybe our particular favourite food.
Oh, some good chilies then.
Good chilies. That's one thing.
And I'm allowed the occasional glass of cider.
Definitely.
Good. And there has to be some music as well then, I think.
So, chilies, cider, and music. What music genre or favourite music piece would you choose to bring along?
I have a fairly broad taste in music, but I think at the moment the music I listen to most is what I might call modern Scottish music, modern Scottish traditional music, if that's not a contradiction in terms. So, likes of Skipnish, Skerry Vaux, Runrig, Dougie MacLean, a whole range of other ones. And I'll put a plug in here. So my favourite one at the moment, I think, is Skipnish's Walking on the Waves, but actually the Spooter cover version of that, seeing as that's a band that my older son's been involved in. I think I'll have to give that one a plug as well, so you can go onto YouTube and find that.
I've been walking these shores of my days, but with you by my side, I am walking on the waves. I've been walking these shores of my days, but with you by my side, I am walking on the waves.
So, this is the month of November, and recently we may have noticed that there's been some political drama going on, and we won't delve too deeply into that, I hope. But what do you feel that a nation's leaders need to prioritise in regards to science for progress?
What does a nation's leaders need to do as far as science for progress is concerned? I think there's a large range of things that's there. I think as a nation we need to recognise the value of science to our nation in a variety of ways, not just economic but also in terms of our health and well-being, and the fact that we need to maintain a good supply of able scientists to work in a range of disciplines to allow us to maintain the sort of life which we want in the country. And that goes all the way from the start of primary schools through universities in terms of education and having the relevant people in there to promote the sciences there. It means providing the appropriate support into education establishments to allow young people who might be interested in science to realise it is actually a useful career option. I think we need to be clear that there is short-term and long-term science when it comes to research, and that for the good of our country we need to be addressing both of those. We need the short-term science to go into the engineering and the things that are happening here and now, but we also need the longer-term science in terms of preparing for what the world needs in 20 years' time. And so we need, as a nation, to put appropriate resources into the research, into the education, into the broader education of the nation as to why science is important and why actually knowing about the way the world works is a worthwhile thing and is more important than opinions where it is something that can actually be described by science.
Fantastic, what a comprehensive answer. So now we're going to move on to some quick fire questions. So I'm going to cut down the amount of time you have to answer a bit, but they should be hopefully easier to answer. So question 1. In a holiday destination, do you prefer to go somewhere hot or somewhere cold?
From past history, cold.
Me too. Rural or urban? I think you've touched on this.
Rural.
Snowboarding or skiing?
Cross-country skiing.
Cross-country skiing, how nice. Your favourite chocolate bar?
Cadbury's Dairy Milk.
Very classic. I think this is one that you've answered. Favourite music genre? Scottish, traditional, modern?
Yes, but there's a variety I'm very happy with, but that's there at the moment. Well, I think back to last weekend. I mean, I was at the University Gilbert and Sullivan on Friday, which was great fun. And then in Perth Concert Hall on Saturday with Dougie MacLean and friends, which was another fantastic one. And this coming week I'll be across in Cooper at the Cooper Youth Music Theatre. So, there's a variety of things that are there. And you asked about photography, so I'll be across with Cooper youth music people doing photographs for them during the week as well. So it all ties together.
Fantastic. I love how you follow around to go and live out your passions. What is your favourite TV genre?
I don't actually watch a great deal of TV. So in terms of current TV genre, is not. Quite happy to look back at some some classics of my youth in terms of Dad's Army, or Porridge, or what other things are there? There's a whole range of video type things we're happy to go at, but and a variety of films. But no, we're not big TV watchers.
What's your favourite non-academic book?
This is one you asked me about earlier, fortunately, and I've pondered long and hard on this one. But actually, I'm going to come back with what is my real answer rather than the answer that you want to hear, which is I'm going to pick out on a Arthur C. Clarke book, Rendezvous with Rama. It is not the classiest of writing, perhaps, in terms of what you might expect me to say, but it is a really good read. It's a really interesting read, and it's a story that I could relate to, and who knows, might even have relevance to the future.
Excellent. What's your favourite concept within science fiction?
Taking one, well, it's the whole concept of science fiction is taking one thing you're changing, and then what's the consequence of that, and doing that logically.
Concise answer. Who's your favourite science communicator? You could say yourself, but it might look a bit arrogant.
To answer that question, I think it has to be a case of in what medium, but I'm going to choose, if I may, I'm going to choose the written word, and I'm going to go for Bill Bryson.
Bill Bryson, excellent.
Because I thoroughly enjoyed some of his work in looking at science.
So, St Andrews has 3 beaches. Which would you choose? Which is your favourite beach in St Andrews?
The West Sands.
West Sands, beautiful beach. They all are, admittedly. And which do you prefer, the homegrown Ginettas or Nardinis?
Ginettas.
What's your favourite season of the year, as we draw into the cold winter months?
Favourite season has to be the summer. No, that's not true. Spring is also good. And autumn has its good things as well. What's my favourite season? I can find good things in all the seasons, but I think probably spring going into summer is when things coming back to life after the winter is particularly inspiring.
And can you tail off our quickfire round with your favourite joke? Physics related or otherwise?
I think it's a crazy question to ask a favourite joke, but let me just tell you a particular joke which I find vaguely amusing, might be a wee bit different. In curved space, you can't use a t-square. The coordinate mesh will not be square. When your equations you solve, they will always involve root 1 minus v over c squared.
Lovely. Didn't expect poetry.
Well, a limerick can be a joke, I think. And anyone who can get root 1 minus v upon c squared into limerick, I think, is doing a pretty good job. I have no idea who the author was, but I loved it.
It's quite impressive, yeah. So, to finish up our interview, could you tell us one of the most special things that you found about St Andrews? You've touched upon this already, mentioning the community, but St Andrews, the university, the town, we'd love to hear what you think.
I'm going to come back to the community, because what makes my job so pleasant is the community I work in. It's a community of my colleagues. It's a community with the students of the town. It's a community with the townspeople. And there's lots of overlap amongst those, and it's something I really value, is there's a widespread recognition of each other's worth. There's a widespread idea of people are here to support each other and to enjoy each other's company. That crosses all sorts of potential barriers, and that we're all in this together. And that feeling of a mutual respect, of working together, in some cases playing together, doing things together in a whole variety of different situations, is something which is really special to me.
Fantastic. What a beautiful and fantastic answer. Thank you so much. Dr Bruce Sinclair, this is the end of our interview. Could not have been more pleasant. It was an absolute joy to interview you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You've been listening to Insight, the University of St Andrews Student Physics Society's podcast. I was your host, Samuel Avery. Our thanks to the wonderful academics of St Andrews. and join us in the future as we learn more of the people making our education. This podcast was produced by myself and our publicity officer, Conor McBride. To find out more about the Physics Society and what we do, please find us on Facebook or Google St Andrews Physics Society for our website. Goodbye!